Okay, okay. अभी बंद रखो.
All right, so welcome to the third of the lecture series under Swastibhavatu Distinguished Sustainability Seminar Series. And I'm honored today to have Professor Ashok Gulati as our distinguished speaker. Of course, Professor Gulati needs no introduction to anybody who follows overall his work in agriculture economics and the column he contributes very regularly in Indian Express and many other. I have a privilege to read them very fondly. Still, I have to do this honor to introduce himself. So he's going to talk about feeding India while protecting nature, the role of agri policies and new technologies. So Professor Gulati currently is Distinguished Professor at the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, which is also known as ICRIER. And before that, he was Chairman of the Commission for Agriculture Costs and Prices, CASP, for Government of India 2011 to 2014. And he was also an independent director at the Central Board of Directors of the Reserve Bank of India, the central bank, the regulator of India, Government of India. And he is currently a member of the 12th Audit Advisory Board of the Controller and Auditor General of India and an independent director of the Board of Directors of Kotak Mahindra Bank, who are, you know, that were great supporter for Kotak School of Sustainability. Prior to that, Professor Gulati was director at the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, for 10 years during 2001 to 2011. He worked as a chair professor, NABARD at Institute of Economic Growth, which is a very leading think tank, And prior to that, he was also Director, Chief Economist, Agriculture and Rural Development at National Council of Applied Economic Research, NCAER, from 1991 to 1997. Professor Gulati is deeply involved in policy analysis and advice in India. He was also youngest member of the Economic Advisory Council of Prime Minister during Atal Bihari Vajpayee's tenure. And besides that, he advises many state governments and chief ministers, including the governments of Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, to list a few. Of course, he has got many accolades and honors. I will not go into all, but most importantly, he was awarded with Padam Shri by Government of India in 2015. He's a prolific writer. He, as I said, he keeps on contributing to the mainstream media. He has written 21 books. You can imagine how frequently he contributes and writes. So one of his column, which, as I said, I read and many of you might be reading, is From Plate to Plow. That's a regular column in Indian Express and Finance Express where he contributes. So with this, I again feel very privileged to welcome Professor Gulati to IIT Kanpur and Kotak School of Sustainability. Sir, please come and give a talk.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Professor Tripathi. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here talking to distinguished professors and the young minds who are going to shape this country's future. The topic we have picked up is feeding India while protecting nature. I have a lot to say about agriculture policies, but all the technologies will be with you. And the two need to work together, because if technologies have to be taken up, then the policies must create a conducive environment for it. Otherwise, there are 20 technologies on only one or two are taken up. So what is the linkage between policies and technologies given the challenge of feeding India? And that's what the focus of this talk is going to be. I had the privilege of interacting with the students and other young minds already. And there were quite interesting ideas that came out of it. And maybe I'll pick up some of that during the course of this lecture. The way I'm going to be talking will be divided into 4 parts. First, a few introductory things to those about Indian agriculture who are not very much familiar with agriculture part, although everybody is familiar with the food they eat every day. But how it is being produced, what challenges it has, some of the basic facts about India's agriculture in general. Then, you know, as Albert Einstein once said, if you want to know the future, look into the past. So we will look into the past, how India fed itself. Many of you were not born at that time, but when I was at your age, or even younger, we used to wait for 2 hours, 3 hours to get 2 liters of milk in this country. And there were famines, sort of continuous droughts for 2 years. And what the situation was. So we'll talk about that and how we have really done wonders in feeding ourselves so far. And then we will come to the real topic of policies and technologies. And what is the future? How do we repurpose many of these policies? Some of this work that I'm going to be talking about is being done by my colleagues who are also here and some back in the institute. So it's a collective effort of the research that we are going to be presenting to you. When we talk of agriculture or food, normally we think of producing food, how food is being produced. But in the agri-food system, we need to have a full spectrum. How food is being produced, it is not food for production per se. It has to reach to some stomach where the consumption is going to be. And the challenge is also from where it is being produced to taking it to where it is going to be consumed, and what is the quality of that, what is the nutrition of that. So we need to understand the full agri-food system. Production will be influenced by certain factors which seed industry, crop insurance, fertilizer industry, pesticide, farm machinery, banking, and all those inputs that go into it. Then there is a logistics challenge. It has to be stored. You know, the crop will come once in a year, but you want to consume it throughout the year. So somewhere somebody has to store it properly and then throughout the year release it. It has to be processed, it has to be marketed, wholesaling, retailing, commerce, e-commerce, international trade, all that becomes a part of the in-between marketing part of the story. And then we have the consumption story. That as a consumer, do I get what I want? Is it available on the shelf? At what price it is available? What is the affordability that I have? What is the stability of that system? Today I can get, tomorrow I may not get. How stable is that system of consumption, accessibility, and all these questions that we are going to discuss. What is coming up is that production sector particularly is being threatened by environmental changes. So there's a lot of risk that is coming up on the environment and on the production basket. Climate change that you are here. And normally when we talk about sustainability in the production system, what we talk about is the resilience part of it, how resilient it will be. But that's only one part of the story. We'll come down to that. For the consumer, what is important is not the quantity as much as the nutrition part of it. Whether the food that we are consuming has enough nutrition. And that depends upon whether we have followed a process from the soil to the crop to the human health. If our soils are not nutritious, then they cannot produce food that is nutritious, and therefore what humans will get will be not very nutritious food. The quantity will be there, but the nutrition will be reduced, and that is what is happening right now in India. Now, if we have to solve all these things, public-private partnerships would be needed. Government cannot do everything. A lot has to be done by the private sector in particular. And accessibility of food to the consumer depends upon incomes, and even farmers, the production behavior. Unless they get a profit and they get an income, they will not change the way they have been doing business. So these are the things that we have to keep in mind. Why we need to transform agri-food system? We are the largest populous country on this planet right now, and we are likely to remain so by 2050. We will be 1.67 billion people on this planet. So the challenge of feeding this large population is going to be tremendous. The land is limited, the water is limited, and they are degrading in quality, and therefore how do we produce more? That is a major challenge. Increasing urbanization. Gradually, India is going to urbanize. The forecast for the next 10 years roughly is that India will be building one Chicago every year. That's the type in which urbanization is increasing. And then the challenge comes if the food is being produced in the hinterlands and then you have these cities developing, you have to transfer all that food from the hinterland villages to these cities, and you have to store them and you have to distribute that. It's a major logistics challenge. I'm not sure how many people know what is the average holding size in this country in agriculture. In 2015-16, the latest year in which land census was done, it was 1.08 hectare. So with 1.08 hectare as the average holding size, how much food we can produce and how much income the farmer can get. So it's a land of small holders in the country. 86% of our land holdings are less than 2 hectares, that is less than 5 acres roughly. So given that challenge of small holders producing more food and their income, how are we going to increase that? It's one of the major challenges that we are going to be facing. Then of course the climate change is coming, as I said, and extreme weather events. 1 week increase in the temperature in February, next month. If you have 1 week increase by 2, 3, 4 degrees, just for 1 week, you are down in your wheat output by 5% at least. So you will be losing 5 to 7 million tons of wheat. So, and this extreme event on the temperature side and on the floods or drought side is likely to be increasing over time. That is what the climate experts are telling us. Besides that, at present, our basic natural resource endowment, soil, water, air, and biodiversity, what we call SWAB, is under tremendous pressure. And I'll come down to that, what we are doing. And that leads to our nutrition question on the consumption side. It's a challenge. 35% of India's children under the age of 5 are stunted. That means their capability to grasp and think and analyze is reduced. That impacts their earning capacity for lifelong. And one of the reasons behind that stunting is that the food that they are eating is not nutritious enough. Even the wheat and rice are deficient in zinc, and zinc deficiency leads to stunting amongst children. So how do we get and solve that problem? That is going to be another major challenge. Let me give you a little flavor of economics so that we are on the same wavelength as we talk. On the left-hand side, we have overall growth rate during different periods, different decades. You look at 91, 92 to 2000, 2001, when the reforms started off. For first 10 years, there was not much change in the growth rates of overall GDP and agriculture GDP. In fact, agriculture GDP came down a little bit compared to the decade before. But after that, from 2001 onwards to 10-11, there was a major change in terms of overall growth in GDP, and that's one of the highest growth rates India's history has witnessed. 7.5% at that time, agriculture was at 3.3%. This 2011-12 to 24-25, agriculture grew by 4% per annum, whereas overall growth has marginally declined to 6.2% per annum. Why I'm showing this is because during this period when agriculture grows fast, poverty reduces maximum during that time because much of poverty is in rural areas and their main occupation is agriculture. So agriculture needs to grow at a faster rate if you want to reduce poverty at the fastest pace, and that is the first duty of any government to abolish poverty from this land so that everybody can at least afford good food. So if you look at the way poverty was declining, this poverty definition is the international poverty definition on the basis of which all other countries are ranked. And you will see during this period, the poverty has declined much faster, and especially this period 2011 to 2022, last 10 years, poverty decline has been very, very fast. One of the reason is this 4% rate of growth. Okay, of course there are some welfare measures and so on and so forth, but given all this, the poverty decline has been one of the fastest. And today, as per the extreme poverty definition of the World Bank, which is applied to all the countries, poverty, extreme poverty, that is $3 per day at purchasing power parity of 2021. I'm not sure whether you understand purchasing power parity given your technical, but we can discuss that later. It's only 5.3% are extremely poor. But the bigger definition of $4, $4.2 per day per capita, then still about 24% of the population is poor. And many people are arguing that we should get away from the extreme poverty definition now. We should increase the poverty line so that better, standard can be attained, and we should not just think of abolishing extreme poverty, but even above that, we should try to get that. Over a period of time, the share of agriculture in overall GDP reduces. That's the development path that all countries have followed. And that is what we are also coming up with. About 16-17% is the contribution of agriculture to overall GDP. But India's problem is that the workforce engaged in agriculture, which was 66% in 81, has come down to about 45-46%. So the labor has not got out of it. In fact, it had come down to 42% or so in 2018-19. But after that, especially after the COVID shock, it started increasing because there was a backward flow from the urban areas to the rural areas. And many have not gone back to urban areas. Maybe the men have gone and women have stayed back. So our workforce in agriculture is still much higher than what at our level of development should be. It should be, I would say, not more than 25 or upper limit 30% of the workforce engaged in agriculture, but we are having 46%, 45%. And that's because our non-farm sector has not grown at a faster pace, especially small and medium enterprises, which absorb a lot of labor, or the construction activity. If you look at China, 200 million people had moved out of agriculture to build Shanghai and Beijing and the other major cities. That has not happened in India yet, although some cities are coming up. But I think the pace of movement out of agriculture. So think about the average holding size has been declining because population pressure is there. And then people are not moving out of agriculture at a same pace. So with that small holding, to have good enough income by producing wheat or rice or millets, it's impossible with 1 hectare. You can't feed a family of 5. That's the problem. And therefore, we have to think about alternative ways to augment farmers' incomes and also move them, many of the people outside that. But all said and done, these challenges that we are talking about, as I said, we have to look into the past if we need to understand what the future is going to be. Think about my youth. 50 years back. In mid-60s, we had back-to-back drought. And India did not have, the production dropped. Back-to-back drought, 2 years successive drought has happened only 3 times in 100 years. And that was the time we needed at least 10 million tons of wheat. And we didn't have the foreign exchange to buy it. We were perpetually short of foreign exchange because of the wrong policies that we followed. And that is the time India was in a panic. And we signed something called PL 480, Public Law 480, and US agreed to give us 10 million tons of wheat against rupee payments. So it was more like an aid. Okay, you can go ahead. Why India was in panic, and I do want to reflect that. In China, during 58 to 61, 1958 to 61, the Great Leap Forward, 30 million people died of starvation. 30 million people died of starvation. 3 करोड़ आदमी भूखमरी से मर गया. India was on that verge. If we had not got PL 480 aid, then millions would have died. But getting aid always has some political strings. And whether we committed a mistake or what happened, every 15 minutes a shipment was coming from US to India to feed India. And we were called a ship-to-mouth economy. That is directly from the port, from the ship, distribute through public distribution system, the food, otherwise people are going to starve. The ship-to-mouth economy. And then for 72 hours, suddenly the ships stopped. And that created a panic in India. An Indian ambassador in US was asked what had happened, why the shipments have stopped. Lyndon Johnson was the president at that time, and our ambassador came to know that he's very upset because we issued a statement in favor of Vietnam when they were having a war with Vietnam. And he wanted to teach a lesson to India that you are so dependent for food on us, and then on ideological grounds you are favoring Vietnam when we are giving you free food. So he turned the tap off. 72 hours, that taught India a very important lesson. That for basic food, you cannot depend on anything. And that sowed the seeds of change. And what was that change? India decided to import the biggest ever shipment, 18,000 tons of high-yielding variety seeds of wheat from Mexico. And those seeds were new technology. Not sensors, but the seeds. Was by an American, Norman Borlaug. And this was the biggest ever shipment in the world, 18,000 tons. There was a big debate in the parliament. And the left parties opposed this because they said you will forever become a slave of the West by importing these seeds. These are not green revolution, it will be a red revolution, and so on and so forth. But at that time, the choice was either to face starvation or to face humiliation of the US because of cutting down the supplies, or accept new technology. And India decided to go for the new technology. But along with technology, they also created something interesting, and that is the Agriculture Prices Commission at that time and Food Corporation of India in January 1965, 2 institutions. Because when technology is brought in, the production increased. And the fear was, as the production will increase, prices will collapse. If prices collapse, then farmers will not adopt the technology. They need their profits. So Agriculture Prices Commission was asked to ensure and recommend to the government remunerative prices for farmers, and Food Corporation was supposed to buy all that is being offered, the excess production. The first crop came in 1967 from 1st of April onwards. There was a burst of grain in Punjab, and so much food corporation had to buy, they did not know where to keep it. They had to close down the schools, primary schools in Punjab, and these school children, their classrooms became the first godowns of FCI. Where are we today? Within 4 or 5 years, by 71, 72, India became more or less self-sufficient in basic food grain, wheat and rice. The rice varieties came from, have you heard of Gurdev Khush or Michel? These two persons also got World Food Prize later. I'll come back to that. They invented the rice varieties IR8. And they came from Philippines, Los Baños International Rice Research Institute. What was the result? Think about it. Wheat production in 1965 was only 10 million tons. Today it is 118 million tons. More than 12 times. Rice production increased 5 times. Today, in case of rice, how many would you know? We are the largest producer of rice in the world and largest exporter of rice in the world. In a global market of 61 million tons, India is exporting 20 million tons. And the forecast is that by 2030, we may be exporting 30 million tons of rice to the world. And this is happening after giving free wheat and rice 5 kg per person to more than 800 million people. And our Food Corporation of India today has almost 4 times the rice stocks than what the buffer stock norm is. So we are having mountains of rice literally in the country, and food security, basic food security is very much, and this was all done because of the new technology of seed. But there is one more thing that has to come with it. There are 3 persons we have to be grateful to. Norman Borlaug, which was the inventor of wheat and the father of Green Revolution. For rice, Gurdev Khush and Michel were the persons, but there were 2 other persons who had got the Nobel Prize earlier, and that is Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch. They are the ones who captured nitrogen from the atmosphere and brought it into urea. That's your technology. I think chemical engineers. Because when you want high-yielding variety seeds and you want more nutrition from the soil, soil is not able to provide you that. You have to fertilize your soils. And these 3 people, or 4, Gurdev Khush, if we add, have saved on this planet millions of lives, if not billions. Millions of lives have been saved. This planet on its own cannot feed more than 4 billion people. That is the capacity of this planet. In a natural manner, many people, when they want to go organic or natural farming, you can feed only 4 billion people. Who are the other 4 who would volunteer to die of starvation? So you have to know the contribution of these technologies that have fed 8 billion people today, and still there is enough food on this planet. You look at the fertilizer consumption and our food grain production. I want to speak on this because what happens to the wrong use of fertilizers, I'll talk later. But first, let's see the contribution of fertilizers to overall food security of the country. Without fertilizer consumption, the production would not have increased at this pace. When we talk about fertilizers, 55% of the product is in terms of urea. So urea is the main thing that you hear when you talk to fertilizer, the farmers, fertilizing urea, urea, urea. So that's the bigger story. Another 17% is DAP, diammonium phosphate. That is what is required. When you apply too much of urea, it gives you a lot of greenery and growth. But if you want grain formation, you have to use, along with that, DAP and MOP, the muriate of potash. If you don't use that in a balance, you may get greenery, but very less grain. That is where the problem is. The crop response ratio to fertilizer consumption, which was more than 10, that means 1 kilogram of NPK, N is nitrogen, P is phosphate, and K is potash. If you applied 1 kilogram of NPK in 1970s, the response was more than 10 kilograms of grain. Today, that response has come down to about 2.3, 2.4. So that means overall response of fertilizer usage, response of grain has been declining because we are not using it properly, not in the balance NPK ratio that is needed. And that needs to be noted because that's linked to policies. So don't blame fertilizers as a technology or the product. There is something wrong at the policy end that we need to correct. There is another thing you may hear sometimes, even the ministerial level or even at the prime minister level, we say, oh, we need self-sufficiency in basic fertilizers, basic food and all that. Food self-sufficiency you could not achieve without using fertilizers. And fertilizers, what we are producing, urea, how much we are producing, how much we are importing and how much we are selling. But look at the red line below. Whatever urea that is being produced in the country, and it is all gas-based, 80 to 85% of the gas being used in urea production is being imported. Same thing, DAP or phosphatic fertilizers, 90 to 95% of either the rock or the acid is being imported. And MOP, potash, is 100% imported. So think about, we still have self-sufficiency in wheat and rice and overall agriculture, but all the material that is going to produce that is hugely imported. And therefore, it's a very delicate policy balance that we need to do, how much we import directly, how much we produce at home, we import the rock or the basic gas. So that's a critical part of the policy. When we talk about food, I do want to touch upon milk. By the way, milk is our biggest agricultural commodity. The value of milk is more than the value of rice plus wheat plus all the pulses plus sugarcane. So if anybody asks you which is the biggest agricultural commodity of the country, it is not rice, it is milk. It's way beyond. And in this case of milk, one fact that I want to put before you, in 1951, India was producing 17 million tons of milk, 17. US was at 53 million tons, more than 3 times. Today, this graph is up to 23, 24, 25 data says 248 million tons. India is producing 248 million tons. And where is US? Can you guess? 102 million tons. 102 million tons versus 248 million tons. And it is all done by smallholders. Average holding size, the herd size, is only 4. not 200 cows or 500 cows as US says. It is all done by smallholders, and it was done, the milkman of India, Dr. Kurian, who put many of the smallholders together and aggregated the produce. I want to give you this example because there is a lesson that we have to learn. This is the third one beyond wheat and rice or milk. This is cotton story of technology. BT cotton you must have heard. It is GM crop. First GM crop that Mr. Vajpayee took a bold decision to allow in 2002. At that time, our cotton production was only 13.6 million bales. Within 10 years, we reached almost 40 million bales, 39.8. Okay? This turned out to be even a bigger revolution than the green revolution, the gene revolution we called it. And then we messed up with that because we wanted not to give royalty to the companies that were producing those GM seeds. What is the lesson? The story is between green revolution, milk revolution, and gene revolution. These are all technological changes. Green revolution was primarily between the government and the international centers. The green revolution was not ours. The seeds came from outside. We multiplied that, and so let it be very clear. So that technology was imported from outside, both for wheat as well as rice. So keep your doors open if you want to access the best technologies in the world. But it was done by the government. The milk revolution, putting the smallholders together, was an institutional revolution along with the technology. What was the technology? The trust factor that was created amongst farmers was a small lactometer. If you go to Gujarat, even with 2 liters of surplus milk, a lady is coming to pour in and sell that, and they test at that time this little component, put it in the lactometer, and lactometer will tell you how much is the fat content, how much is the SNF, and the price is according to that. Otherwise, everybody first time brought milk with the water, and they said we can sell it. Nothing doing. So adding water will not help you. But then to get the market, milk had to be processed, the whole system, pasteurization, homogenization, and then it had to be transported at 4 degrees. There is a milk train that went from Gujarat all the way to Calcutta. Milk train at 4 degrees temperature. So there is a massive technology that is needed in the logistics framework to reach, because East India was short of milk, and even in in Delhi, if you come, all these milk booths and so on and so forth. But this was done through cooperatives. The gene revolution was driven by the private sector. The seeds again came from outside by Monsanto, the multinational company which was later on bought by Bayer for $63 billion. So seeds came from outside. To create one seed, it takes almost 10 years of research. India spends entire ICAR budget on research and development is about 10,000 crores, less than 10,000 crores. That's about $1.1, $1.2 billion. Bayer alone today is spending $1.7 billion every year on agri R&D. So the research frontiers are changing and moving from the government to the private sector. When they move to the private sector, they need to recover their costs of investment because it takes 10 years to do this. And the method globally is that there is a royalty, some trade fee that you have to pay to access that technology. If you are not ready to pay that, you are out of the system. So Monsanto went out of the system because we stopped giving that politically, again a policy problem, and our production started declining. This is what the decline, because we could not access the next generation of technology. Today, Bayer is coming up with 5th generation of technologies, in BT cotton, we are still stuck with the first generation. So if you don't pay, either you do your own R&D, or if you are importing from outside, you have to pay for that. Only 3 days back, I was in Nashik studying the grapes story. Normally, we have been exporting Thompson grapes. This time they were late rains, and 40% of Thompson grapes is destroyed. There is a new variety from Spain which farmers have been adopting called Ara, and that withstood all those rains. But that variety you can access only if you are ready to pay 5% royalty on the sales. So those farms were totally beautiful grapes still holding on, and those who were growing the other variety without any royalty, 40% is gone. So that's the beauty, that if you want to access best technologies which are coming from the private sector, then you have to pay for it. Otherwise, you do your own research and development and distribute free. So there is a lesson, important lesson for technology. That's your part of the game, but it is associated with policy. If you don't allow them to pay, then you cannot access those technologies, because you don't have your own technology, because you are not investing enough in R&D. So that's the story. Interestingly, quickly, India is a net exporter of agriculture products. By the way, China is the largest net importer of agriculture today. Even US, which is one of the big exporter of agriculture, actually is a net importer of agriculture. It imports more than what it exports. India is still, so far, all these years, a net exporter of agriculture. And remember, it is all done by those who are smallholders. It's not 500 acres of one plot and big machinery. You can do wonders even with smallholders. Our biggest export item is rice, about $12 billion. Next is marine products. Shrimp requires very high food safety standards, SPS, and still we are able to meet that. In fact, to US, when we are exporting agriculture, the largest commodity is shrimps. So we are able to do that. $52 billion last year we exported. We imported about $38 billion. Edible oil is the biggest import item, followed by pulses and so on and so forth. Now let me quickly get into this. Policies and unintended consequences. This is where the problem is. Our policies, we give a huge subsidy on inputs to our farmers. Fertilizer subsidy is one of the biggest subsidy that we give. Only thing bigger than that is the food subsidy, which is to the consumer. But to the producer, it is the fertilizer subsidy. About 2 lakh crores this budget is going to be, and 2.25 lakh crores is going to be the food subsidy, roughly, that is going to. So on an average, you can take about 4 lakh crores. Other countries also give subsidies, but in a different manner. Most of the developed countries protect their output prices. They don't give subsidy on inputs. Or if they give, like China gave about $22 billion, they give it directly to the farmer, but don't disturb the prices. Prices of inputs will be at the market rate. So whatever you want to help, you give directly to the farmer, empower them. And our problem is that fertilizer subsidy, urea for example, is almost 85 to 90% subsidized. It is so cheap that it gets diverted into non-agriculture uses, even smuggled to neighboring countries. That's where the problem and the policy distortion comes in. But one thing that we need to understand, and I want to spend half a minute on this issue because it's not easily understandable. One side is giving input subsidies to the farmers to encourage the productivity, higher production, and also keep the prices of the commodities low. The moment price of a commodity goes up, we put export bans or we put controls on traders. They can't hold stocks, things can't move, put a levy and this and that. All restrictive marketing policies are put into action. That suppresses the prices for the farmers because you want to help the consumer. So there is a consumer bias in the system. So when you net out the two, you give positive support through input policies, but then you suppress the prices on the output side. One foot is on the brake, the other is on the accelerator, and you don't know where are you moving. When you net out, a team of 10 persons, ICRIA team and the OECD team worked for more than 2 years on this, and there is a 300-page report on the website of OECD, and we looked at other countries, 52 countries, and India, what is happening? India is one of the few countries which is net implicitly taxing its agriculture as far. The producer support estimate, this is the standard measure which is measured across countries, is negative in case of India. You can see this is India with a negative PSC, producer support estimate, whereas for all the OECD countries, if there is a 14% positive support, India, there is a minus 14%, minus 15% support. So there is a negative subsidy element, you know. That means input subsidy is positive, but output price is suppressed, net out the two, and then you come to know. So don't say your farmers are being highly subsidized. They are subsidized on the input front, but they are suppressed on the output price front. I can give hundreds of examples how that is being done, but the net result is that they are being implicitly taxed. That it's all backed up. You look at China was like us in 2000, where we are and where China's support to agriculture has increased even more than the OECD countries. And China, interestingly, from a lesser area, and their holding size is smaller than ours, and from a lesser cropped area, they produce more than double of us, almost double of us, $1.3 trillion worth. We are at $630 billion. So they are able to do that because they are giving support directly to the farmer. They are investing in R&D, and their productivity levels are much higher than ours. Smaller holding size, no big farms like US or Brazil. So the potential is that if we do our agriculture policies right, the technologies are there which can double the production than what we are doing today easily. Where is the problem? Water is a serious problem. Because we give free power, total power subsidy to agriculture and household sector is about 2 lakh crores today, 2.05 lakh crores. Out of that, about 80%, 85% is to agriculture, a free power. The net result of that is switch is always on, pumping. Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, water table is declining by 1.5 feet every year, literally. So that's a disaster that is taking place right under our nose. Carbon footprint. That's another thing for UP. Much of the, overall about 13%, 14% is coming from agriculture side. And within agriculture, about 55% comes from livestock sector. Our bovine population is the largest, like our human population. We have 302 million bovine population, and they have methane. A lot of methane is, and as the bulls are not needed anymore on the farm, and they are left on the roads, and that is creating a major. So we'll come down to UP problem on that and some solution. But all said and done, agriculture also has a lot of footprint from livestock sector and rice. These two we need to tackle. Methane. Okay, I'll take how much time we have? Another 5 minutes? Or I think quite a bit. So much of the resources, India is putting reasonably good amount of resources in agriculture, and the past reflects we have been able to get food security, but we have neglected our natural resource wealth. I didn't talk about soil. Our soils have become deficient in certain basic, zinc is one example that I gave you on that, and that is causing problem. Soil organic carbon, which normally should not be below 0.75. Actually, World Food Laureate Ratan Lal says at least 1 to 1.5. Much of our soils are less than 0.5 or 0.4 actually. In Maharashtra, so soil organic carbon is very less in our soils. That impacts the productivity because we are not treating. So soil is a problem, water is a problem, air is a problem, biodiversity I haven't talked, but we are losing biodiversity when in Punjab, Haryana you are doing only wheat rice, wheat rice, wheat rice. So biodiversity is lost in that process. The reason is much of the resources that are going in agriculture, 75% of that are going in the form of doles. That is the subsidies. And development activity is much less. Union budget, as I said, food or fertilizer subsidies, these are doles or PM Kisan, though it is not distorting, but it's a direct income support. Agriculture R&D. We have worked on that earlier, that if you spend 100 million on agriculture R&D of 1,000 crores, you will get a return of more than 10 times in terms of what we call the marginal rate of return. You can get 10 times more return from agriculture R&D investments compared to fertilizer subsidy, which gives you, if you spend 1 rupee, you will get less than 1 rupee actually, and too much of damage on the soil and water. That's the problem. So we need to, where is the solution? And that's where the role of IIT comes in. Many people, good intentions, they want to go back to natural farming, organic farming. Our humble understanding of agriculture for the last 40 years, and I have worked at least in 40 countries, agriculture. If you want to go organic as a national policy, first thing you should do is stop all the fertilizer subsidy. Why are you giving so much subsidy? But remember, the productivity in organic will be much less and the price will be much higher. Can India afford to lower productivity of basic staples, wheat and rice? For 2 years, an institute of ICAR in Modipuram experimented on natural farming because the government had been talking of zero budget natural farming, and they found that the wheat productivity and rice productivity goes down by 29% and 50%. Can you afford that? Don't make India another Sri Lanka. So be careful on that. India's population is going to be the highest on this planet, and we cannot afford to lower productivity. So national policy as a niche market of organic, if somebody wants to follow that and get a 50% higher price for it, please go ahead. Farmers should have all the freedom to do this. But as a national policy, I think to the best of our understanding, there is no way out. But what we need to do is don't do indiscriminate use of fertilizers or pesticides and others. And that's where precision farming will show the way forward. And with precision farming, you can produce more with less. The policy has to change. That is, fertilizer subsidy, which is on the pricing of fertilizer, needs to be given directly to the farmers and free up the prices of NP and K. Let the market prices, like China has done. And then the innovations will come in terms of machinery, in terms of products. Soluble fertilizer through drip irrigation, fertigation, what we call, the nutrient use efficiency goes to 90% compared to granular urea, which gives you only 35 to 40% efficiency. So the plant consumes only 35 to 40% of it, rest is going in the environment as nitrous oxide, and nitrous oxide is 273 times the carbon dioxide. So you are creating poison in the system by subsidizing granular urea. But you do not subsidize the soluble fertilizer, which gives you nutrient use efficiency of 90%. So the policy has to change. And then, of course, grips, sensors, unmanned aerial. Today we were looking at some of that drones and all that. Already in US, John Deere has been using something called see and spray technology, John Deere. So they have all the cameras fitted, and in the tractors or harvest combines, they see where, how much fertilizer, how much pesticide, even seed, at what depth it has to be, where the, how much is the moisture content, at what depth the seed has to be put in. All these technologies do exist, and we need to bring them if we can't do our own. Drones, we have been talking, it's already in use. Robots are coming. So all this is part of the IIT Kanpur, where it can show the way of producing more with less, with precision agriculture, with minimum damage to the environment. On that. This is what hopefully we will do that. But there is one also, we have to improve the income of the farmers. And that will not be done by producing millets or even wheat or rice on a small hectare land. We were in Punjab, which is growing wheat and rice, but there are farmers who have some poly houses in Punjab, and their income is 5 times, 10 times, 7 times higher than those which are producing wheat and rice. Last week, I spent in Nashik, the grapes district of India. Those people easily per acre, 10 lakhs, 12 lakhs, that's the income that they are earning. From your wheat and rice, you can't earn more than 2 lakhs or 50,000 or 1 lakh per acre in a year. So you can, by diversifying to high value agriculture, that's what China did. They started importing low value commodities like soybean. Think about it. They have domestic production of soybean of 20 million tons, and they are importing 110 million tons of soybean. And they put that entire belt into high value agriculture, growing apples and other high value. So you need to switch to high value, but for that you need access to finance, you need access to markets, access to a different type of infrastructure of cold storages and all that. One last thing on the bulls that I want to talk about, because UP has the largest population of bovine population here. And bulls are not needed anymore on the farms, so they are left out. So one thing is the sex sorted semen technology, all the AI, artificial insemination that you do. There is now 90% probability that it will be a female, not a male. So that technology is already there. I think we need to use that to minimize. Otherwise, 50% will be bulls who are not needed. You can't cull them. and then you have all the problem on the roads. That's one part of the story. The other is having gaushalas, and if you are putting them in gaushalas, you can create some minimum scale for their dung and use that for green manure, and you can put agri-photovoltaic, on all that gaushalas. That can be a center of solar energy, so that it can finance the fodder for those bulls. So the panchayat lands can be used, and then you have the solar energy along with it, and then you create a scale to create green manure so that they can die peacefully in a natural manner rather than getting hit on the roads. So that's the way. This is agri-photovoltaic that we have been talking about, and you can grow 2 crops below that and still have solar energy on a regular basis. Every month the farmer can get income from solar, and that's, I think we are working on this in 3 states, and hopefully with IIT Kanpur we can. Last slide. Nutritional security. Biofortification is the way for the new technology to make crops more nutritious. That's the next phase. I do feel, I'm not sure whether IIT is into genome editing. That's also the next phase that we feel new technologies will come. Gene editing is coming whether we like it or not. GMO is a little different. Gene editing is the way, because if we have to deal with climate change and so on and so forth, and even nutrition, you will have to do a lot of this. And this is what I talked about already, and I'll stop here. Thanks a lot. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Gulati, for such a impressive talk. I mean, for me, like so much of learning. I believe all the students sitting here, our faculty colleagues, certainly had the same feeling. So now it's open. I think I would request that please ask your question very specific. Don't, put or make any comments or something, right? And everyone just stick to one question. Yeah, Sarvana, please.
Yes.
Where you can coat this urea on the microbes or a neem, etc., so that it can stay there for longer time. So you won't allow the volatile, so that we can save, and that way, if not, our procurement may be reduced. If that research is going on that way.
Yeah, neem coated urea was introduced, and 5% price increase was also allowed in that. But the way I hear from the industry, I would say it hasn't taken off, although it's more or less compulsory, but the way it is being done, the practice of doing that has increased the leakage even more, because the plywood industry and the glass industry find it even more useful takeaway. And on the agriculture front, how much it is going and how much we are able to save. If you had followed PM's remarks when urea was neem coated and also when nano urea was released, idea was that urea consumption in the country will be halved. This is a quote from the PM. Reality is that we have set up 5 more plants under the government on urea, and consumption and imports are both increasing. So jury is out on that. It hasn't succeeded that.
Yeah, ma'am.
So we hear a lot of opposing viewpoints. Gene-edited food on health. Is there enough evidence that it is not going to harm, or You might have more information on that. Could you enlighten us?
Well, to the extent I know, food that has been released has been tested by the developed country labs and the governments, and only then gene editing, even Europe has allowed, right? GMO was the question mark, but GMO has been there for 25 years in US, 30 years, 1996. There are about 76 countries that are using GM. About 200 million hectares are under GM crops in the world. When you and me go to US, we all take corn, all the soya and other things, and it's all GM. People have not died. And so there are differences because of ideology. That is one part of the game. Same thing was said about yielding variety seeds when the debate was there in 60s. So my understanding is that these technologies have been well tested and they have been in existence for the last 30 years. People have been consuming, animals have been fed on that. Even in India in 2002, when GM cotton was released, the seed of cotton is being fed to animals. The seed oil is being consumed in every third shop in Gujarat, you can get it. So, there are bodies which do the safety test, otherwise it can't be released. Any seed, it's a 10-year process. It's not that today you get it and out you can release it, no. So it has to be tested. But if there is anything which shows something negative, BT brinjal, which was developed here, we did not allow. Bangladesh has adopted and prospering on that. So as I told you, 200 million hectares are under GM crops. Gene editing is much simpler and straight. So you're not crossing from the other. It is the same family. So these are the whenever new technologies will come, there will be opposition. Whether it was the spinning jenny, there was how much opposition. The man had to hide the spinning jenny and run for his life.
To energy, like for that matter, we are using biomass in our thermal power plants, but as we are seeing that there is no direct benefit to farmers with that policy. So is our government working on that, or do our government really want to connect farmers with energy or something?
The biggest energy thing where farmers have gained, we allowed ethanol blending 20% in petrol. We started off with sugarcane, and massive investments took place in UP for ethanol. So farmers have got good prices for their sugarcane. They were able to raise the sugarcane prices as a percentage of sugar price is the highest in India compared to anywhere else in the world. After that, people may not be aware, maize, and now even rice. Last year, 5 million tons were put into ethanol because we have so much abundance of rice. Okay, if that was not there, then a bigger crisis of plenty. So these are going on. I may not be in favor of rice putting in ethanol, because when you buy from the farmer, it costs the FCI 42 rupees a kg, and they are selling it to ethanol plants at 23 rupees a kg. To me, this is not done.
But we are talking about net zero, and we are talking about net zero emission by
I
2070.
think
So
let's have some other questions, right? You can talk to Professor
So
later.
your other biomass, yes, if we can do that. But these technologies are coming, but we have achieved within very short span 20% blending. So question is where else we can use biomass and other things. But it's coming.
Thank you, sir, for the very insightful talk. My question is about the water production, rice production in India. Rice as, like India being the largest producer of rice as well as the largest exporter. But with rice, the question of water consumption in the rice production comes into play. India, one, is quite inefficient in producing the rice when it comes to water usage. So has there been any policy action on suppressing the production of rice, at least for the export part of it? Because we are depleting our water resources as well.
Okay. That has been our major concern. We have been working with the government on that. Rice, 1 kilogram of rice requires anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 liters of water for irrigation. Let's take 4,000 as average. Even if you assume half of that water, 4,000 liters, goes back to groundwater, half, 2,000 liters, is the net withdrawal. So when you export 20 million tons of rice globally, you have exported 40 billion cubic meters of water. 40 billion cubic meters of water. And that's primarily because it's free here. Power is free, water is free, more or less. So that has led to very skewed overproduction. My team here, led by Dr. Reena, we worked it out in Punjab. 1 hectare of rice gets a subsidy of 39,000 rupees from fertilizers and power. If you want to grow pulses or oilseeds, which you are net importers, pulses don't require that water. Not 22 irrigations, 2 irrigations, 3 irrigations are sufficient. They don't require that urea because they are nitrogen fixing. So if you give them 35,000 rupees, anybody switching from rice to pulses or oilseeds, at least for 5 years, because the government will save fertilizer subsidy and government will save power subsidy. State government will save power subsidy and central government will save fertilizer subsidy. The center state have to combine, join hands and announce a scheme. We gave presentation to the government on this and then they said 39,000 rupees seems very high. High because you never worked out on the numbers. These are numbers from the Government of India database. And they said 35,000 rupees if we give for that, for Punjab, Haryana, other states will also start demanding. So I said give them, at least the state government has to put in 50%. So if state government gives 50%, 50, you want self-sufficiency, you will achieve within 3 years, 5 years. They got afraid that there may be a big demand. Let's see if I see the minister again coming week. There is a solution, what we call the crop neutral incentive structures. At present, your incentive structures are skewed in favor of water intensive crops, rice and sugarcane. Okay, huge fertilizer consumption and which is highly subsidized, and power and water almost free. So all this export, part of that is because of these subsidies. So we need to change the policies and then hopefully we will be able to reduce the area under rice and reduce the methane emission and the nitrous oxide and all that green. On 1 hectare of rice, 5 tons of greenhouse emission carbon equivalence is being produced in Punjab and Haryana, 1 hectare. You start carbon markets.
Yeah, in the interest of time, we'll stop question and answer session now, but Professor Gulati will stay here for another 10-15 minutes. So you can ask the question, just please stay back. So please, thank you, sir, again. Let's thank Professor
Thank
Gulati.
you. Thank you. Oh. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yeah, no problem. No problem.
is a